that was quite a story, right? Yep. What not every one of you probably knows is that not only have I been active setting up Arnhem Bitcoin City and convincing merchants to accept Bitcoin and running a Bitkassa as a payment processor, but I've also been the chairman of the Dutch branch organization for Bitcoin companies. And Bitkassa was just one of the members of this branch organization. And in the beginning, I was just a chairman. It was only like us with the Bitcoin companies having talks about how we could prevent fraud on our platforms and that sort of stuff. And in that role, it became far more important when the legislation in the Netherlands, the AML legislation, kicked in 2020, when all the Dutch companies needed to register at the Dutch central bank for just registering as a crypto payment processor, with all the rules that come with it. And in that role, I have met some of the professionals from government agencies, like the Fiat, the tax services, the Ministry of Finance, where we had talks about new legislation, and they consulted us about this. And also, for instance, with the FIU, and the FIU is the organization where the banks and cryptocurrency companies need to report unusual transactions to us, so they can figure out which transactions need to be investigated, and they set that through to the investigation services to pick that up. So I've been working with these people as well, and also with other people from the compliance industry. For instance, when one of the members of the branch organization was filing a court case against the Dutch central bank because they overreached their legislation, we got help from one of the compliance people in the Netherlands that has like huge status in this profession. And I'm very happy to have these people here in Arnhem. And what I thought is, how cool would it be if we have like Bota or Ludmilla, to get them on a panel with the legislation people from the Netherlands that I worked around with and had good contacts with, and maybe add a true Bitcoiner. So I thought, well, Jos Provoost knows a thing or two about Bitcoin and legislation. He's following a lot of things on that topic. So that's just my, and of course, most of the legislation that we have in the Netherlands is not being determined in the Netherlands. It's being determined on a European level. So I also reached out to people from the European Parliament to join this panel and to just have an open discussion with everybody about anti-money laundering legislation. What are the pros, what are the cons? Because I too, having worked in this field as one of the Bitcoin companies, I too have seen fraud cases where it's actually good to have some knowledge about how the transactions went, because you can prevent fraud from happening on your platform. Probably none of us is happy when people are getting scammed or that sort of stuff. So I'm really happy to have this panel here, and I know a lot of the people here are not from the legislation side of things, and most of them are quite liberal and Bitcoiners. But I do hope that everybody can put up some respect for the people from Dutch government or agencies to actually show up here in the Lions Den to share also their view on their professional work environment that's happening. So I would really like to have a big round of applause for Doreen Rookmaker. Please come on stage, guys. There she is. This is an electable member of the European Parliament. And Maud Buckering. the Dutch professional on AML topics. So she will be leading this panel, and I'm really honored to have you both here. This is Rebecca van Essen from the FIU Netherlands, and Sjors Provoost. I think most of you know Sjors, but Sjors is like one of the Bitcoin developers, and Ludmila, who was just also giving the talk here. Eric, who should I give my microphone to?
Okay, well, thank you everybody to be here, and thank you for the very good introduction also. So my name is Maud Bukkerink. Just as a bit of a background of myself, I work in this area of AML, which already when I came in, I saw a slide, KYC's of threats, so I consider myself that way, but still. I've worked in the area of AML for about 25 years, and now I'm a consultant. I work with a lot of Dutch crypto service providers on any kind of compliance issues. But I did work for the Dutch Central Bank and also for the Ministry of Finance, so a long time on the regulatory side. And with me, I think I'll ask everybody for a short introduction, starting with Doreen, please.
Well, thank you so much, Maud. My name is Doreen Rookmaker. I'm a member of the European Parliament since 2020 for the Dutch member state. I'm a member of the Econ Committee and the Trans Committee. For the Econ Committee, I'm very much involved in anti-money laundering legislation, and of course the MiCA and DORA as well. Before I became a politician, I worked in banks for almost all my career as a risk and compliance officer. So from that angle, I can also look at Bitcoin and the developments that are going on. And I've worked for almost 10 years in a railroad company as well, but that has nothing to do with the subject today.
Okay. Thanks. There are a lot of experience on the regulatory side and on the compliance side. Rebecca, I think, yeah, Simone.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca van Essen and I'm a relation manager at FIU the Netherlands. So it's my task to stay in touch with the reporting entities, especially the crypto companies, but also payment service providers, electronic money institutions, and gambling service providers. So we have a lot of chats about the quality of the reports that we receive, but also about recent trends and phenomena that we noticed, or maybe the companies noticed and FIU isn't yet aware of. So that's kind of the most important part of our dialogue. Thank you.
Hello again. My name is Ludmila Kozlovska. I represent Open Dialogue Foundation. I'm Ukrainian. I'm defending human rights, and I'm a foundation helping those who are politically persecuted all over the world. And at some point, because we were so effective in defense of political prisoners, I was classified, announced as a threat to national security by 3 authoritarian regimes. And they're going after me. They were going after me since 2018 up to last year, October, when election in Poland happened. So I'm not anymore classified as a threat to national security. Moldovan government also apologized and actually recognized my case as politically motivated. Kazakhstan is still going after me because the regime is there, but it's lost its credibility because we won in more than 7 court decisions that all this propaganda is fake. But even having all of these acknowledgements, both institutional, from the side of parliaments like Bundestag, French Parliament, European Parliament, and many other institutions, or even governments, while our threat to national security in Poland, Moldova during Plahotniuc time, or Kazakhstan, I was now national interest by Germany, France, and many other countries. And with all of this political support, all of these dictators were able to weaponize my banking data. They were going after every other donor, every other volunteer, every other basically supporter. My banking data was weaponized in a level that we were all completely de-risked our bank account till nowadays, even if we have special law in Belgium after all what's happened with me, so there was special regulation to grant banking for such people, de-risked for political reasons and many other reasons, unjustified reasons, but we still don't have bank account in Belgium. And this is the reason why we started to use Bitcoin, not only to resist against this transnational repression, and I remind propaganda against my organization, me, my family members, was produced in more than 20 languages with abuse of AI. So We still use Bitcoin to operate in Europe, but we also teach activists all over the world, specifically where it's transnationally and basically locally financial exclusion used banking system as a weapon against critics of the regime, how to use Bitcoin. And especially the only tool for us is peer-to-peer transactions. For this reason, we defend it. We defend developers and miners who build for us freedom technology to operate and defend human rights.
George, please.
Yes, I'm George Provost. I mainly work on the Bitcoin Core full node software. So you might ask yourself, what on earth are you doing here? I have some interesting hobbies. One of them is going to the courtroom in Den Bosch and listening to the whole Tornado Cash trial. I try to understand how certain regulations are, interacting with the world of Bitcoin, and where that creates some friction, to put it nicely.
Thank you. Yeah, so the whole panel discussion will be indeed on AML regulation, and we already heard, of course, the previous discussion of what can happen if you misuse AML regulation, but we also want to discuss why regulation could be necessary. And I think everybody of you know that will have an account maybe at the Bitcoin exchange in the Netherlands. You would have to go through certain processes of identifying yourself. If you reach a certain level of threshold of funds, you would have to justify where your funds come from, what's the source, if it's not illegal. And indeed, if a crypto service provider thinks that something is wrong, they will report it to the Financial Intelligence Unit, where Rebecca works, to really say, well, something happening, something unusual happening. And I think Ludmila's case is then that can go wrong also, very much so. So we have a few discussion points, and want to start with basically the first, maybe much more for the regulatory maybe part of this panel. So what would happen if you don't have any regulation, if you would have under-regulation, what would be if the crypto service providers or anyone else would not be KYCing or knowing their customers to some extent. Maybe Rebecca, you can go first on giving your point of view on that.
Well, of course, that's a very complex question. We see a lot of exposure when it comes to darknet markets. People buy child pornography. We see scams. We see links to terrorism finance, sanction evasion. And of course, we feel like that if we completely stop regulation, that we will get ourselves to a point where these kind of criminal activities might flourish. So that's of course what we fear. On the other hand, when there are too many obstacles, the Dutch and European market may become less attractive. Crypto exchanges, crypto companies might move around the world, and European citizens may still be targeted as victims. But the proceeds of criminal activities might be far away, where the Dutch government, for example, cannot get access to it. So that's kind of the other side of the spectrum.
And Doreen, because the EU just has been imposing regulations on AML, on banks for the longest time, but also on the crypto service providers. We already heard, I think, in a previous panel on the fund transfer regulation was mentioned by the guys that were online indeed. So there are quite a lot of regulations issued on crypto service providers. What would happen if, your opinion, why is that necessary, and what would happen if there's no regulation?
Well, I'm happy to be here today to talk about crypto, but of course we have these AML regulations all for a longer time in banking. And my context as a politician and also as a banker with the supervisors about anti-money laundering has been in a longer period than since 2020. There are two aspects I would like to emphasize. I think if you think about regulation, I think monitoring aspects are very important. As you already mentioned, you can see a lot of, well, criminal activity going on, and it's very good if banking supervisors, so like the Dutch National Bank, can supervise and banking or crypto organizations can monitor what's going on and report on this. What I'm not so much happy about is the gatekeeper function. The gatekeeper function is very problematic, I think. Why? Because all money in the whole world is born white or legal. It is it's emitted legally. It becomes illegal or black money as soon as it is used for criminal activity. And if you emphasize the gatekeeper as something to prevent terrorism and criminal activity going on in the systems, then we all know that all these criminal activities will find a way around the system. So the criminals will continue, but they are less monitored if you don't let them into the system. And as I worked as a risk and compliance officer, there's no better place to monitor criminal activity than within a bank, because you know everything from your customers, and you can use all the evidence that you can gather. But we do not allow the criminals into the system, so they're looking to go elsewhere. And then we have a problem. So the bad guys will find a way, because their core business is to trespass and to break the law. And they're always smarter, better, and faster at it than we are. But the normal people, the good people, the people who want to do good things with, for instance, Bitcoin, but also within banks, they are getting the penalties. So if we didn't have know your customer rules and regulations, are not so many, or not so severe, or not so costly, I think the whole system would improve. Even our monitoring system of criminal activity. For the monitoring regulations, I think it's very important to keep them in place, because as we all know, we're not living in paradise, and there are bad people.
Thank you. I think you gained some votes here. Sure, you want to react back to Rebecca? Sorry, please, yes.
Maybe I may respond to that. Of course, I have a little kind of different opinion when it comes to the gatekeeper function. I still feel like the crypto companies or other financial institutions, they are the ones who are actually able to see and detect unusual behavior. So we cannot make that solely a government task. Just like I think it's very important that we don't stop monitoring at all. So if we need monitoring, I think it's very important that you give that task to the companies that are probably most aware of unusual activity. And of course, there's also a lot of discussion when it comes to perhaps another system, where there is kind of a different role for the gatekeeper, and where we use a system where you start reporting suspicious activity instead of unusual. So it will probably become much more difficult to report, because you have to argue probably with stronger arguments than you do now, that something is suspicious. And I think that if we move towards a system where we work like that, the tasks for financial institutions, crypto companies, may become even more heavier, and probably for that reason also more expensive. So I'm a very big fan to the gatekeeper function as it is today.
Can I yes, please. I want your goals go to the next panel.
Yeah, just a small reaction is that, what I think is, I can understand where you're coming from, by the way, but if you tackle people when they try to get into the system, if they try to get into the banking system or the crypto system, there are a lot of people who have actually done nothing wrong, but for some sort of reason, they are not allowed to open a bank account or to start an account with the crypto organizations, because organizations will be afraid of the supervisory elements and the supervisory restrictions that are there. And this means that banking and also Bitcoin industry is not inclusive anymore. And I think it's very important that we allow everybody in the whole world, by the way, to have a chance to participate, also in financial industries.
I think that brings me a bit to also to Sjors on the Tornado Cash, because that's kind of decentralized and exchange developers. So that's not under regulation at all. So what was the kind of the case what you took away from the Tornado Cash court case then on the stance between should there be regulation or not, or what happened in that case? Because I only saw it from the news basically.
Yeah, so this this is a case of is there regulation or not? If you look at the AML regulation, like the AMLD directive, then there's not, because it excludes non-custodial services. But there's also just a general rule against money laundering, and that apparently, at least this judge believes, does apply. And this, of course, creates a practical problem, because as a company, even if you wanted to do something about the money laundering to the degree you can on a smart contract, I don't think you can. But if you wanted to, then the question is, are you allowed to? Because, in Europe we have the privacy regulations, and if you want to ask somebody's passport, then you have to have a legal basis for that, which you wouldn't have. So this seems like a mess right now. I take a far more radical position on the whole way we deal with money laundering. But if I ignore that for a second, I would say either you put these companies, like non-custodial companies, under the same AML laws as the custodial companies, or you actually allow them to do what they're doing. Because right now they're just getting prosecuted and arrested, but they have they can't even file a suspicious activity report even if they wanted to. So that makes no sense to me. I would really want to go the completely different direction, to be clear, but I'm just putting that out here.
So that's a good point indeed. You will be convicted for money laundering, helping money launderers indeed, instead of being able to regulate anything. I think, Ludmila, please, yes, you saw the other side basically.
No, I would not say that I saw other side. I would say that I experience. It's not something I saw. I just experience how it can be abused. But I also experience as a Ukrainian, because, we're more than in favor, for example, effective regulation when it's really prevent or stops crime. But when we see that, for example, travel rule, which has to build trust, right? And when this trust abused by dictators, when they use financial institutions, state institutions, to lift sanctions, for example, like Kazakhstan, succeed to lift sanctions from 3 Russian banks on the territory of Kazakhstan, in a FAQ. And they help Russia to circumvent sanctions on the biggest amount from other third countries. We issued for the last 2 years 7 reports showing how banking data, how actually banking system, entire financial institutions of third countries abused to circumvent sanctions. Of course, it's painful because a lot of people dying right now in Ukraine and many other in Syria just because this regulation is abused. So we as human defenders, we're not looking ideally for any financial tool. We understand it can be used both bad actors and good actors, but we want to have neutral language in regulation towards to freedom technology. This is first thing. Second, we want to have real trust. So if you have evidences how third countries like Kazakhstan, Iran, and Turkey, Emirates, they circumvent sanctions and undermine our rule of law, human rights in G7 countries, what you're doing with this regulation, how you reform it, how you adopt it. We work extensively with members of European Parliament and national parliaments on, enhancing this sanctions regime, but smart sanctions, not just sanctions for sanctions, going to dummy companies which can be easily created by authoritarian regime, and this is happening right now, affecting us as Europeans and Americans and so on. But we want to really accountability for those who create these companies at the authoritarian regimes who has this power to do so. And third, we are very concerned about privacy. We are not sure that it's a correct approach giving policing functions without any remedies for financial institutions. This is something what basically almost destroyed my life of our accountant, lawyers, everyone, because these data, in other institutions you have at least remedies. You can go to the court and so on. With bank, you can do nothing. They always can cover this, and they're doing it right now in Belgium, saying, we have a right, according to anti-money laundering country anti-money laundering country regulation. What does it mean? Why? Why it's so, lack of accountability, enormous power? These questions I still have,
George, please. I think you want to react, and then I'll have back Rebecca.
Yeah, so I have a little thought experiment, which I don't know if you really want to do this, probably not. But here's the thing. So we have these banks that are private companies, and they're doing, I think they're doing government work. They're doing police work. They're investigating transactions, and they're deciding, maybe not if it's suspicious, that's a higher bar, but they're at least deciding that it's unusual and that it needs to be reported. So what if you said, okay, let's take all these compliance employees, thousands of them, and we just officially make them police officers with the same duties, with the same responsibilities, but also the same accountabilities. So now when your bank sends you an email like, hey, what's this transaction? You can reply like, thank you for your message. I would like a lawyer because you are interrogating me and I have rights, including the right to not answer your question, because right now you don't have that right. That's a thought experiment, and then I think you would notice two things. One, everybody would probably consider that a surveillance state because it's just too much people doing this. And the other would be that it would be a really bad use of resources, because you would then see that probably about half the police force works for banks now, if you look at the numbers, and they're getting paid 5 times as much as the police on the street, and they're catching some criminals, I don't want to deny that, but very few compared to if they were all detectives and going after criminals more directly. So that's my thought experiment.
I think I want to go to Rebecca, because what would happen indeed if everybody was police, but also if the unusual transaction reporting duty was not up to banks, but it would be the police itself having to do everything. That would be also a different angle, I think.
Well, of course, there are already capacity issues. So I don't think that the government wants to work towards the situation where we are responsible for monitoring everything that goes on in the financial system.
So to be clear, in my experiment, these people are added to the force, right? So
yeah.
The banks are still paying for them, they're still paying their salaries, but they're now government employees. So there's the existing police is not reduced.
You mean the responsibilities, the accountability? That
yeah, they are legally the same. They have, they have the same authority
legal obligations,
and you have the same rights when you're a suspect. But we're not taking staff away from the police in this experiment.
So you also have the same resources.
Well, you already have. I mean, what kind of resources do you want to add?
Police information. I don't think it's a good idea that all these thousands of bank employees have access to police information.
I completely agree with you. But this is the point of my experiment, basically.
Yeah. So as I said, we already have capacity issues, so I don't think it's a good idea that we bring all these people at the police force.
But then it's more like a management problem, I guess.
Yes, yes, it is. But before you have all these people on board and they have the right screening, etc., I think it's a very big operation to get them all where you want them to. And as I said before, I think it's also very important that you realize that people who work at FIU or at police, they have resources that are very specific, and I don't think it's a good idea that a lot of people have access to such sensitive information. Especially when I take a look at this audience, I don't think you feel like it's a good idea that all these thousands of people have access to probably all your history.
I guess they would have more information than even in my... So in my thought experiment, in the current situation, these bank employees have information about me, about a lot of things about me, right? They can see every transaction I've ever made in the last 25 years. They can see when I went to the toilet, at which train station, in which countries I've traveled, which hotels I've stayed at. They know everything about me, but it's true that if you also gave them access to police records, they would know even more about me, especially about me, of course.
That's my point.
Yeah.
I think Doreen has a comment there.
Well, I think you made a good point. And I think about 20 years ago, we took the wrong turn. We gave banks the job of policemen. And of course, I think this has some very fundamental privacy issues here. And if you go to a bar and you speak to someone who's working at the anti-money laundering department of a bank, you don't know, but you might run into somebody at some time that knows everything from you, and you don't even know. And these people are not trained to do a very well, to use the information that they have in an integer way. And this is very important. I used to be a bank manager at one point in my career. And I had to fire one of my employees because they were testing and researching their neighbors. And I'm sure that 1 out of 6 who are now working in these kind of departments in the banks are doing this. So if you allow bank employees to know everything about you, you have to have supervision to make sure that they don't abuse this power. And this will be very ineffective, I think. I think it's a very good idea to bring back this task to the police force, where it belongs.
Wouldn't you run the risk then that the police would just spread out the net over every bank and get all the information, because they have more powers even to obtain that information if they have a suspicion? So they would get more information even than they now have through the FIU, which kind of is this buffer between the banks and crypto service providers and the police that kind of siphons out the real suspicious information. They would just try this phishing net.
Well, this risk is, of course, there, but there you have legislation. This is why you have legislation also for police force, of course. When I started in banking at the beginning of the 90s, so this was there was no internet banking. But if a policeman came into the office and asked for information of one of your customers, you were obliged to give it, but only if they had the right permission to ask for it. And this is, of course, nothing new. This could be there in place again.
But how will they know that there is something going on? They can only go to the banks if there's a reason, but how will there be a trigger if the bank isn't sharing information prior to that event?
That's why we actually have UN Convention on Human Rights, that we don't think that every person is criminal. We, first of all, until it's proven in the court or there is real suspicion. That's why we actually have all these police, special services. We pay our taxes, right? These guys sitting and they exercising their job. They're really professionals. So we just expecting them to do so. We don't need to give them even more and more functions to go after us. And we kind of adult, we also want to live in good environment. We don't need to be always, kind of, I don't know how to say it in English, I forgot this word, but just like expected to do bad things. Like we trust more dictators and their financial systems than we trust to our European citizens. It's not okay.
The presumption of innocence. The presumption of innocence, that's the thing. That seems to be missing in the financial system, and I can see why you'd want that, because you want to proactively find the criminal flows of money, etc. But it does mean that the presumption of innocence just disappears. If you're using a bank account, you could, at any point, get questions about that.
I think that's the role of the FIU specifically, yes.
Yeah, and maybe to make it more concrete, if a person is using his bank account to launder money, and you say only the police is responsible for detecting that. How will they know if they do not see what's going on that bank account? They must always have a reason to go to the bank and ask for that information.
Yeah, but you know.
I mean, we are activists and we're doing it in authoritarian states where have you no access. I'm not a police person, but I see that this and this official, they just bought 2 houses with their salary of $300, that their children live in super luxurious places, study in Harvard and so on. And I start to ask questions. So, and you have all cameras, like we move in the streets everywhere, camera. You move everywhere and you have everything recorded almost. So police have a lot of instruments to understand every hotel you stay, you always report it. Like you go into websites right now, you're going to be reported. So police has a lot of instruments. And financial data, it's everything about our privacy. It has to be really protected. We need to speak about basis of our European human rights, conventions and exercises of these rights, because we losing it with giving it up in name of security, but we losing security with losing human rights. This is so easy to abuse, and we see it so much in authoritarian states. And we live in a world where just a small piece of the world is democracies. So we shouldn't apply in Europe Chinese style of surveillance. It's super dangerous.
So there is a Dutch technical legal term for this, what you're describing, looking at big houses, etc., as the patseraanpak, but that was actually, I think, declared illegal too, so there is a bit of a conundrum there. But the idea would be that you look for the expensive cars, and I think the problem in Europe, in the Netherlands, was like you look at the guys in the expensive cars, but these guys were always Moroccan, and so this became ethnic profiling, and it led to other problems. But maybe
we here in this panel do not have to solve this problem. You know, before there was an internet banking industry, we had other sorts of transactions. We had other ways of doing it. You know, I'm still from that era where we made money transfers by hand or by telephone. You know, so all these old ways of working are still there. So for young people, maybe it's very hard to understand that you can do some research without internet or without 100% surveillance, but it is possible.
I was just wondering, in short thought experiment, indeed, and Ludmila's case, or also Bota's case, even if the banks would not have the responsibility, wouldn't it still be the governments or the police say, oh, you're a target, and I'm still now going to all these banks and obtain information and say that you are a person of interest or even suspicious? Or would that make any difference whether or not there are these AML requirements on banks?
Yeah, I mean, but this is what I tried to explain on the very beginning, but maybe it was not that clear. So I was announced a threat to national security, which is the highest possible, like more dangerous than terrorists, right, in 3 states. What does it mean? That means that they abused Poland, Moldova, and Kazakhstan. They provided false information for all European states and placed me in Schengen information system as a threat to national security. Because I had, like I asked questions. My defense was built on public campaign. I said, okay, show me this evidence. I said, no, it's so secret. You are so dangerous. We cannot show you. I said, okay, you don't trust me. You don't trust my lawyers. Show it to the judges. Show it to the government's other financial or any kind of special services in EU. So they were not sharing it because it's so secret, you know, because there is nothing. And of course, because there was nothing and the ground was only politically motivated because we were defending political prisoners, these governments in EU countries, they said, okay, we need to start reform of Schengen information system. And this brought me back 3 weeks after. So I was able to defend myself. I was able to defend myself against personal attack when physical attack was against me, right? But the only thing with all this political protection, what I was not able to do, it's with banking. And I'm saying right now again, so we brought this issue to Belgian Parliament, European Parliament, Council of Europe, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Everywhere there's right now discussion that anti-money laundering regulation used to de-risk, debank, financially exclude people. And we have special regulation in Belgium to give access for this kind of people like me. Diplomats, by the way, they also, a lot of politicians, they also de-risked. So do you think banking, again, give us banking? No. No, they have even more rights than, for example, government of Belgium said, look, you have decisions of the court, you have all of us like support. There is no legal ground to de-risk this organization and these people who work in this organization. They don't care. So this shows that right now, when in a world where you cannot live with cash, in a world where you have to have banking to pay your taxes, where you have to have banking to exist, this is one of the most severe tools to actually financially exclude you. You cannot operate, you cannot get your salary, you can do nothing. And this is the most severe exclusion of society in the modern time. And this is the reason why so much it's abused by authoritarian regime. And this is the reason why we say it's a key issue right now to address, because anti-money laundering touch everything. You cannot rent an apartment because no one from agency is going to touch you. You cannot have insurance, you cannot go to medical services. You can do nothing. It's really absolute isolation.
But are you now advocating... So are you advocating fixing banking, or are you saying let's, maybe fix banking, but let's just use Bitcoin because this actually fixes the problem, but we don't want Bitcoin to be prosecuted? Is that?
So as I said, I'm not naive, right? So maybe, and I'm not idealistic. I'm just a person who actually defending really a lot of politically persecuted people, like hundreds of thousands in many countries, those who protested and were affected with these abuses. So I still think, because I see how regimes abusing sanctions regime and undermining our rule of law and human rights in democracies, I still think we need to have special regulation for financial institutions. But I'm not sure that AML and Know Your Customer Clients is actually an answer, because all regimes know perfectly how to abuse it. And this is the moment when actually decentralization can help. And this is the reason why I'm saying we need to have bridges, we need to have open discussions, regulators, Bitcoiners, financial institutions, banking, financial action task forces. We need to have accountability of financial action task forces to be included as civil society, as industry representative in this regulation and legislation policy creation. Otherwise, we just inform on website, and this affect our life. And to change something which destroys our life, you take 8 years. It's not like it should work, So decentralization for me, it's an answer for many countries where regulation doesn't work, where human rights violated. So all authoritarian states, they need Bitcoin, first of all, as a human rights tool. Here in the room, I'm not sure how many people actually using it for daily life. We don't need it because you have this privilege. You live in a small piece of world which is still democracies, but you can lose it. And this is my main message, and this is the reason why I really appeal for reform of anti-money laundering counterterrorism regulation, because right now it's a tool to prosecute and to violate human rights and financial exclusion, but not what it's meant to be. And this is something what I'm underlining. And Bitcoin is a part actually to financially include, but it can be, again, if it's just monopolized by a few people, if it doesn't develop, if it's not actually properly used in a way that, just small majority of a small group of people is going to have it, it will not help the community, it will not solve our problem. This is my take.
I think also from Doreen's point of view, you're from the European Parliament, you have the regulatory power, but how did you change this balance? Because it's not kind of no or yes, but it's a balance, I think I hear Ludmila say, between hearing also the other opinions. How did you achieve that?
Well, Bitcoin or banks, it doesn't matter. It is know your customer thing is the problem. If you keep it in the banking system, you may think that Bitcoin is the solution because it's not there yet, not as much as it is in banking, but it will get there. If everybody is going to Bitcoin, then the regulator will go there. But what I see as a real problem in European Parliament, but also in the other European institutions, is that there's not enough knowledge about the practicality of financial services. I'm in the Econ Committee with 160 members of Parliament. There are only 3 or 4 who know how a bank works within inside. And I don't mean the front office where every customer comes, but I know at the back office, they have no clue at all. And when I try to make them aware of this de-risking problem, because this is the problem. This is the problem, the de-risking problem, that people who want to have access to financial services cannot get them because banking and also probably in the future Bitcoin organizations are afraid of big, huge fines from supervisors. This is the big problem. If I try to address this problem, then the political discussion, the political environment is so much polluted and poisoned that if you ask people to give attention to this problem, they say, well, you know, banks are crooks. They're trying to make a profit from terrorism and financing, and so we have to go after them. This is how, especially people who are trying to make legislation for anti-money laundering, are thinking, you know? They're just saying to me, you know, oh, Doreen, you worked at the bank, so you're a crook, and I don't have to listen to you. And it's very, very difficult to get a normal fact-based conversation about the problems that people encounter because of de-risking. And I think in the next mandate, we have to address this de-risking problem, because it's nice to catch a thief, but it's terrible if a lot of people are left out of the system. And Ursula von der Leyen tells us all about nobody should be left behind. Well, if you leave people out of the system, you leave them behind. So it's very important that the Bitcoin industry and the banking industry join forces in this aspect and address the problem of de-risking.
I think we only have a few more minutes left, so maybe from final point of view from Rebecca, George also.
Well, I also want to say I'm very sorry for what happened to you and what happened to you. But I also think that in the majority of the cases, the system does work. I am in touch with the banks, and they always tell me how extremely difficult it is to report a transaction as unusual, because they have to argue, and sometimes they feel like something is going on, but they do not have enough arguments, so they cannot report it. And if they report it, so if they find enough reasons, it's still the FIU who decides if we do something with the information. And if we decide not to do something with the information, which is the case in the majority, then I feel like these people aren't affected. Of course, your information is stored in our database, but it's state secrecy. No one will have access to that database instead of the people who work for FIU. It's a very unpopular opinion. But that's also the reason why I'm here.
The Dutch FIU works. I can't certain for the other ones.
Yeah. Yes. My takeaway, first of all, we need more accountability and transparency in function of financial action task forces, because it cannot be, privacy doesn't work in one side, like transparency doesn't work in one side. So if you want to be as transparent, be transparent in front of us. Include civil society, industry in all process. We need to know what you're going to adopt on us and how it's going to affect us with our inputs before you issue any kind of recommendation. First. Second, European Parliament was on the side of human rights, and especially even acknowledged last year in April that crypto assets were used for payment and fundraising, crowdfunding activities, and also was on side of not de-risking groups the most vulnerable, and also like pro-crowdfunding and many other mechanisms. Unfortunately, because of trialogue procedure, where actually governments taking role and civil society excluded from this public consultation, all these recommendations adopted by European Parliament were removed. And these regulation which we face right now, even worse than it was before adopted discussed back in April last year. And this is not like democracy work. And we need to address it in European Parliament, and I hope you will do it. So trialogue should not be black box. We don't want to have financial action task forces standards in European Parliament. This has to be done. Thank you.
So I think Doreen mentioned the possibility that if more people start using Bitcoin properly, like self-custodial, their own wallets, then there's no KYC AML in that system, and then regulators are going to be annoyed by that. They're going to come after it somehow, and we've seen that with Tornado Cash. What that can look like, it's quite unpleasant. We see it in other countries, like I think Nigeria, that are like saying Bitcoin for criminals. We're going to just arrest people. So I think that's going to get ugly. I'm not really sure. I don't have a specific suggestion at the moment.
Final word.
Yeah. Well, let me try to harmonize our efforts a little bit. I think we should educate each other. Yes. We are at the start of a good conversation, and I think legislators should be far more aware of what they're doing, because this goes for every legislation, not only for the AML legislation, anti-money laundering legislation. If you start reading a law or a proposal from the Commission, it has all these nice objectives in it. They're starting to create the best world possible. So you think, oh, wow, this is a good idea. But if you go through the legislation and you really know what's going on in practice, and you understand what kind of consequences it will have, then I'm not so positive anymore. And the problem in Europe at the moment is, because of polarization, that if you criticize the EU, then it's very likely that you get be exposed from the discussion. So I'm really happy that I'm in a group where I can participate in the discussion, and I would invite every one of you who has an interest, because in my next term, in my next mandate, I will organize events, what I did previously on de-risking, because I think legislators should be educated more about all these downsides of their legislation, because I don't think they are bad people. They want a better world. Only they have too much trust in the system, and they have too much trust in legislation, I think.
I think we have to wrap it up here. I think we are out of time, and thank you very much for all these opinions and fruitful discussion also. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. What an interesting conversation. Rebecca, Maud, Dorian, thank you so much, because they wanted to be here. They work with the regulators. It's not easy for them to walk on this stage. Please, thank you so much. This is what we should do a lot more. We are not enemies, we are competitors. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Say it again?
I'm just asking, guys, for it's for all Dutch people here in the room, because we are going to have European Parliament elections in June of this year. I know you all ignoring it, you don't care about it, but you need to vote for MPs like Dorian. It's seriously, it's crucial. And then we can bring Bitcoin to the European Parliament. We can change agenda of the European Commission and European Central Bank. But unless you do something, unless you go and vote, and really I'm here completely endorsing everything what Dorian said, and we have to start working now. Please go to the website of Dorian. I think it's kind of linked, right? And just support MP like this. Seriously, it's crucial. In September, we can do a quiet revolution there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, that was exciting, eh? Are you entertained? Okay, I'm back on stage. Food was great. How was your meal? Nice, eh? I love the bride. Thank you. Now I would love